What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Credit Plug channel. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as smash the like button. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about FICO scores. Now, there's so many different credit scores, and it's important to understand your different personal credit scores because different credit scores might be considered depending on what you're applying to. Now, the most widely used credit scores are going to be FICO scores, but you have a ton of different FICO scores. In fact, you have close to 30 different FICO scores. And so in today's video, we're going to be walking through all of your different types of FICO scores. Now, what is a FICO score? Now, a FICO score is basically an algorithm that's developed by the Fair Isaac Corporation. So the Fair Isaac Corporation is a data analytics company based out of San Jose, California, and they were founded in 1956 by Bill Fair and Errol Isaac. Now, as it says right here, FICO is a measure of consumer risk and has become a fixture of consumer lending in the United States. The Fair Isaac Company is a data analytics company that uses mathematical algorithms to predict consumer behavior. So they're pretty much coming up with algorithms to predict your credit risk. Now, the FICO score is a product of the Fair Isaac Corporation, so it's the standard measure of consumer credit risk in the United States. I'm just going to be explaining some of the different FICO scores that you have. Right down below, we have a sample FICO credit report, and I'm just going to give you some examples of the different FICO scores. And on the right side here is a list of all the different FICO scores. So you have your FICO 9, your FICO 8, and these are the most widely used versions. Now, different lenders are going to use different FICO scoring models, so just keep that in mind. And also, depending on the types of credit products that you're applying for, so if you're applying for mortgages, they have mortgage scores down here, so your FICO 2, your FICO 5, and your FICO 4. Now, one thing about the mortgage scores, as you can see, it's a different number depending on the bureau that's feeding the data to that particular scoring model. So whenever you hear FICO 2, just remember that's only going to be Experian data. FICO 5, Equifax, that's only going to be plugged in through Equifax data. So there's no FICO 5, for example, that's fed in from Experian data. So just keep that in mind with these particular FICO scores is going to be very specific to the bureau. So FICO 4 is going to be TransUnion, and these are the mortgage scores. But you also have, credit card decisioning as well. So you have your bank card scores, and you also have your auto lending scores. Now, think of the credit bureaus as the raw data, the raw information. And one way to think of these different FICO scores is like a recipe or formula, right? So you have the credit bureaus that's feeding the raw information into these scoring models. And then each of these scoring models is essentially an algorithm that's coming up with a credit score based on the different inputs into that scoring model. So there could be different things like, your payment history, your utilization, your average age of account, so on and so forth. Now, each of these models are going to be slightly different, right? Because, for example, your auto lending might look more heavily into your previous auto lending history, or your mortgage score might have a heavier emphasis on installment types of data. So you have to be mindful of the different FICO scores depending on what you're applying for. But overall, the most widely used versions are going to be FICO 8 and FICO 9. You've seen a lot of FICO 9 recently, at least with a lot of lenders starting to adopt it. And down here below, you also see some of the newly released versions. So FICO 10. Now you have your FICO 10, your auto score FICO 10, your bank card 10. You also have your score 10T. So the T stands for trended, and I'm going to go into that later in the video. But these are basically all of the different FICO scores that you will have. So it's just important to kind of understand that. Now, FICO 8 and FICO 9 are the most widely used versions. Now, FICO 8 and FICO 9 are going to be out of 850. Now, as you can see right over here down below, this is just an example. So you have 3 different FICO 8 credit scores, and you also have 3 different FICO 9 credit scores. Now, think of these just as, the same formula, but different data being fed into them. So that's why you have one for each bureau. So you don't just have one FICO 8, you have 3 different FICO 8s. And then you also have some of these auto lending scores as well. So think of these as, different recipes, different formulas. So you have, 3 different auto score 9s, 3 different auto score 8s. and these are all going to be fed in from, different information, right? You have your auto score 2, and just think of FICO 2. Anytime you see a 2, that's going to be Experian. The FICO 5 is going to be Equifax. The FICO 4 is going to be TransUnion. So those are some where it's going to be very specific to the credit bureau that's feeding that particular scoring model. You also have FICO 3, which is going to be in credit card decisioning, but that's only going to be for Experian data. So that's just something to think about whenever you see the FICO numbers. FICO 2, FICO 3, that's going to be specifically Experian data. FICO 4 is going to be TransUnion. FICO 5 is going to be Equifax. FICO 8 is going to be all three. FICO 9 is going to be all three. FICO 10 is going to be all three. So these are just some examples I just wanted to show you. Now, when it comes to the auto lending, these scores are actually out of 900 instead of the 850. So the most widely used versions, FICO 9, FICO 8, those are going to be out of a maximum of 850. The auto scores are going to be out of 900 in certain cases. The credit card FICO scores are also going to be out of a total of 900. And I like to think of these kind of as like specialty FICO scores. They're very specific to certain types of lending products. So in the auto lending, these are going to be auto loans. And then with credit cards, that's going to be more for like bank issue revolving personal credit cards. So depending on what you're applying for, certain FICO scoring models might play a heavier emphasis. Now, a lot of institutions, they may just use one particular FICO scoring model. And another thing you have to remember is that not every institution is going to adopt the latest FICO scoring model. That's all going to depend on that particular lender. And then down here, you have some of the FICO 10 scoring models. Now, FICO 10 is still relatively new, so a lot of institutions haven't even adopted this. A lot of institutions are still using FICO 8 and FICO 9. You have a lot of credit unions, as some of you might know, a lot of them do use FICO 5. So it's all going to depend on the institution. That's why I'm always advocating to gather the data points before you apply, because as you can see, just from the sample credit report that I have here, your credit scores can vary based on the particular scoring model. So in this particular case, with this sample credit report, you have credit scores that range, in the 700s. And then if you're looking at a different scoring model, you have credit scores that are in the 800s. So it can vary widely depending on the type of data that's on your credit report. So you're never going to have, the same credit score across the board, because, these different FICO scoring models are weighting certain types of credit data differently. So they think of it as a different recipe, right? Different formulation.